Astrology Initiates. So today we're going to continue on with lecture 3 in the book The Outer Planets and Their Cycles by Liz Green. We're doing a book study, and real quick, while I'm waiting for a few of you to get in here, I just wanted to show you guys the Divine Timing Database. There's an Android app for it, but it works really well in any kind of browser, mobile, and so you go to moonmatch.love, will take you there quickly, but it's divinetimingdatabase.org, and you click on enter the database. And right now they are having a sale for the Christmas season for the end of the year, and you get 50% off. So if you just want to enter the database and see if you have any matches in there, then it is only $7.50 instead of the normal $15. And then if you meet someone in there, you can always upgrade to the chat or the premium memberships if you want to like FaceTime, or if you decide to give your personal information out, that could be a shortcut as well, but take your time with that. It's kind of cool because you can look at all the birth chart and synastry details and start chatting with someone before you have to, you can kind of get to know someone really genuinely. That's what I love about it. So there's a few thousand people in here, and we're looking for more matches for them. If you enter, you should have at this point at least one match to get to know. At first, it was like, you might have to wait to find a match, but most of you are going to have a match in there by now. Now, when you do go in there, I'll just show you guys really quick while there's still nobody in here. Let's see here. I think there's a little preview of it. It will show you if you have best potential matches. Now, these are matches, I haven't looked at this in a while, where you have moon compatibility and zero malefic aspects, but you could have some yellow flags, which are just, we changed the name from red flag to yellow flag. So because a red flag, really, you should run with even one red flag, they say, I heard. So I was like, oh, let's make it yellow flags, like a sign of caution. They can just be sort of annoying aspects that you might have with someone, but it's not. They are aspects that we do see in long-term couples, so it won't stop you from making a relationship. Sometimes a little bit of friction is good. So if you see this color, it means you have a potential best match, meaning that there is like maybe Mercury square Neptune, little white lies or something, or Mercury square Uranus. I don't even know if that's considered one. But best rare match is where you have no yellow flags, moon compatibility, and no malefics. So you're really, if you enter the database and you get 2 of these and 1 of these, this is sort of the best one to look at, is the best rare match. But it's still worth getting to know the other matches and seeing who sort of stands out to you. And also, proximity and things like that can play a factor as well. If your best, you can only currently search in your country, and we're coming out. If you're same-sex couples can still enter the database, but we're still doing it manually, but they're coming out with the automated system soon. So I kind of sidetracked there really quick. So if you get like a match, you can just hit chat now and it'll automatically pull up the chat, and you can send them a message, and if they're not online, it will email them right away and they'll know that you have sent a message. Sort of lost my train of thought on the last thing I was going to say about that, but maybe it'll come back to me. And then I did have a couple other quick notes that I thought of over the weekend. One of them is, we were talking about, and I swear she was talking about John Lennon and a musical influence with Neptune at some point, but then she went into another Lennon, which we're going to get into his birth chart a little more today. He was more of a political figure. But yeah, here's Lennon's birth chart. But now I see there's a few of you in here, so I'm getting nervous. Let's see. We're talking about how when outer planet sort of influences a generation, somebody will, it's not obvious to us. It's sort of like these external stressors and pressures that we may have in our environment. If there's a recession or Great Depression, the outer planets, or wars with the Saturn Pluto conjunction, this can create sort of a generational influence, and usually there's a spokesperson to come forward. And I was thinking about this the other day. Drake is a Scorpio, and so the Pluto and Scorpio generation really digs Drake. But if you even go back to the Pluto and Libra generation, they're like, oh, he's all right, but the Pluto and Scorpio generation, like, really, maybe not so much now, he's a little, I shouldn't say this, played out, I guess. I mean, I got tired of hearing his voice, but they're the ones that are sort of like really diehard fans of Drake. So it's that Pluto Sun conjunction. And if you watch the Love at First Sight video, we know that like Pluto trine sun can create a very strong love at first sight kind of aspect. So can Pluto conjunct sun. So anybody who's Pluto is conjunct Drake's sun, Drake is going to speak more profoundly to than those whose Pluto is not near Drake's sun. Now, if you're a Scorpio, you may or may not like him because, it's always a spectrum. So I generally find that if you're the same sun sign, you're usually really going to dig each other if it's within a, 5-degree orb, but not always. Sometimes people don't like their own sign, I've found. Hi, Anthony Alvarez. Okay, so, and then there was one other quick thing. I watch a lot of true crime on here too. And sometimes I even do like true crime synastries. So I watch Colby Ryan's channel, and they're very Christian, so they probably wouldn't watch my channel, but that's fine. And he was saying, I was just watching his most recent video, and he was saying, is it even worth it? Is this person even worth it? And I've kind of been preaching that lately, choosing your battles. So for any of you who do have Aries in your chart, whether it be Venus, Mercury, Moon, or the Sun, especially late degrees, we've had Chiron moving through there. He'll be there for a few more years. And I've spoke on this a bit. She even brought up Chiron in this book. The playlist is below in the description, and I'll pin it in the comments to playback if you want to go look for that. I think I might have actually written that one in the title, that it was about Chiron. That's the asteroid, the wounded warrior. In Greek mythology, he was a centaur. Anyway, brief summary of that. And so I think a really good motto for those who have any kind of Aries in your chart, especially late degrees to get through the next few years, is choosing your battles. Is this person even worth it? It's like my guy has his moon in Aries, Chiron's, we have a 3-degree orb with my son, so Chiron's right there. And it's like, I'm like, one day I just had to be like, I know you will protect me, I know you can, but you don't have to, this bum on the corner isn't worth it. Like, if they steal some money from us, or someone's in my face, then I know that you're gonna be able to protect me. But you don't have to go and get into it with every person that looks at you sideways. And I'm an Aries, so I get it, I've grown. But the sun can kind of mature out of it. The moon, it may be a little easier for the feminines. The moon is an emotional placement. So, hi, Liam. Hi. I can't say your name in Russian, and I don't have Russian. I do have a Russian keyboard I could translate, but hi. I believe that's Russian down there. So, I think you're saying hi from Russia. So, okay. Or maybe somewhere in that vicinity. All right. Let's see here. We're gonna just get back. I don't have a lot of time today. I have about 30, maybe 45 minutes. So we're just gonna hop back into where we left off. So I'll be reading. It's a little monotonous, but we do stop. And once I kind of get flowing, it can actually be quite juicy. So she says, where did we leave off? I think we left off on the audience question last time. But right before that, she says, I would like you now to look at Lenin's chart, which I put on the board, because it's quite fascinating to see the way in which Lenin interpreted Marx. Are there any questions or comments first about these two charts? Audience, both Hitler and Marx have the sun in Taurus. Can you comment on that? Okay, so we did read it quite a bit into that yesterday. Not yesterday, last week, where we left off, and it was lecture 3, part 3. If you want to go back to the last video, and there's plenty more. There's 7 lectures in this book. Oh, say Siberia. Awesome. Hi, Siberia. Okay, one more, Mary Jane. I don't know what JF means, but anyways. All right, so we'll leave off. She's sort of talking about, whether the sun, obviously not, sun signs will have similar things going on, but that doesn't mean they have the same capacity, right? For good or for ill. Audience, it's interesting that Hitler had a knowledge and an interest in astrology. Oh yeah, this is where we left off, and that was interesting to me too, because I didn't actually know that. But the way she makes it sound, and we'll read on, is that he was advised by astrologists, just as kings were. Not saying he's a king, just saying that maybe people that come to power have some astrologists in their back pocket. All right, if you ever want a reading from me to get a little more power in your life, it's rotation411.com. We can go over your whole birth chart. And then I have, Q&As too if you want a smaller, quicker read. Anyways, it's interesting that Hitler had a knowledge and interest in astrology. I wonder to what extent he manipulated that knowledge to support his political ideas. Liz, to a great extent. It's probably common knowledge now that Hitler had a stable full of astrologers to advise him. And when they began to advise him with warnings instead of promises of victory, he began to shoot them. So like I said, it's kind of a high-risk occupation. Anyways, it's a risky profession. Oh yeah, that's what she said. There was an immense revival of magical cults during Hitler's rule, and military orders like the SS were quite heavily steeped in ritual magic. So we did leave off here, so it might seem a little repetitive if you watch the end of part 3, but I won't elaborate as much this time. There's quite a lot of interesting literature. So if you want to hear my elaboration, that's where it is. There's quite a lot of I don't know if elaboration is actually a word, but there's quite a lot of interesting literature available on the influence of occult societies before and during the Third Reich. I suppose these two were part of the Pluto-Neptune vision to which he was sensitive. He certainly manipulated all of it. Even the silver and black that dominate the visual presentation of the Reich are symbolic ceremonial colors, and the swastika is an ancient symbol. There was a very extensive knowledge of the use of such things in Hitler's party. It's certainly very Plutonian because it plays on the unconscious of the nation. Both these charts, and that's a book that we might get into, and it's not so astrology based, but we're going to probably, one of the next book or two that we're going to do, if we ever get through this one, which I'm doing pretty good, we're going to read A Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, and that's very much about symbolism. But anyways, it's okay. Both of these charts show the potential for a certain kind of personality with a certain kind of motivations. The missing piece to the mystery of why people like Marx and Hitler affect the world so profoundly lies, I think, in the world rather than in the horoscopes. If the collective needs a particular kind of mouthpiece for its inarticulate longings and needs, then it will find one. Marx seems to have been more of a Taurus than Hitler because he managed to live a stable family life in a rather traditional way, which, Taurus is represented by the Hierophant in the tarot, which is traditionalism. And also Hitler is on the cusp of Aries, so he isn't quite right on the cusp, 420, so he isn't quite like, he would have a slight Aries influence that way, which is the god of war, so you add that to the power cusp, and, sometimes anyways, they can go for world domination on the worst end of the spectrum. But no one would have paid any attention to Das Kapital if it had not embodied something that answered a secret, collective longing for a large group of people. Both these charts show a propensity to serve as a mouthpiece for a particular collective vision. You can't look at Hitler's chart without hindsight and say, quote, this man is going to be responsible for the murder of 6 million Jews and the destruction of half of Europe, end quote. If it were ever possible to work out the chart of Jesus Christ, and there have certainly been speculations enough, I am sure we would be completely baffled at the absence of anything superhuman. But the longing for a Messiah was hot to boiling at the time of Christ's birth, and the man and the myth ran together. I doubt that you would find a configuration in the chart which said, quote unquote, this is the Messiah. The same 10 planets were in the heavens then as they are in the heavens now. The dawn of the Piscean age, and I don't know what she means by 10, you guys, so don't jump on me on that, because it changes over the years, right? Pluto's a planet, now he's not, and I think she might even be counting Chiron in this, but the dawn of the Piscean age had arrived. Now, she was saying in like 500 years ago, in 524, there was a huge stellium in Pisces, and a lot of people, and we're going to go over the age of Pisces, which we're coming to the end of now before we enter the age of Aquarius. It actually won't really happen in our lifetimes. It'll be like, I think it's in the 2100s, but it might even be as far out as the 2400s before we're in the age of Aquarius actually. So we're just sort of on the dawn of the age of Aquarius. And there's a age of Pisces and age of Aquarius in this book. So she, I do feel, there's a really cool series, and I did link it somewhere. It was on Gaia. It's like, I think the secret, now I'm remembering what it's called, the secret world of symbols or something like that, like the secret language of symbols. Speaking of symbols, so like I think it's the second one is about the sun, which has a lot to do with like sort of the occult. Jesus is the sun, and the sun keeps us alive kind of thing. And then the third one, I believe, is more about astrology, and the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius is really what it predominantly focuses on, and it ties Jesus Christ into the symbolism of the age of Pisces as well. So, But it says, but now the dawn of the Piscean age had arrived, and the collective needed a new myth and a new vision of God. So before that, we had the ram, the age of Aries, or yeah, because it goes backward. It goes backwards. So it goes Aries, Pisces, Aquarius. And it's like the only thing really to go backwards. So the age of Aries was before the age of Pisces, then the age of Aquarius, then after that will be the age of Capricorn. So if you look back to the age of Aries before the age of Pisces, and this is in that series I'm talking about. So if you actually just look it up on YouTube, you can put Gaia, which is like Mother Earth, Gaia. And then secret language of symbols, or something like that, the secret world of symbols, and watch the second and third episode, and it will really go in depth on this. I should add it to sort of, if you look at my description, there's a bunch of links. I should add it in there because I refer to it a lot. But anyways, so they needed a new vision of God. So they went from the ram, like, sacrificing the ram and the lamb, to now, Jesus was the sacrifice. And that's the age of Pisces. So, and that's, how he fed the man with the fish, teach a man to fish, all these kind of fish connotations with Jesus. Okay, this is why I'm so interested in what happens in individuals where their outer planets are strongly marked in the horoscope. So I would argue that if we did have his true birth chart, there would probably, he'd at least have a well, he's born around Christmas, so he should be Capricorn, but some people say that's not accurate. But I'd say he at least has like a very significant Pisces rising, Pisces moon, something like that. Okay. Um, if we could look at his birth chart, that's where I was going with that. She says we wouldn't be able to tell in his birth chart. I beg to differ. I think there'd be a very heavy Piscean Neptune influence, and maybe a little bit of 11th house Aquarian, humanitarian influence as well. I'm sure there's a lot going on right on that cusp of the 11th and 12th houses, and Neptune and Saturn, because he did form, the structured religion of Christianity, and then Uranus, sort of freedom from the Roman Empire, right? Okay. Anyways, this is why I'm so interested in what happens to individuals where the outer planets are strongly marked in the horoscope. They're prone to becoming vessels for the collective. But if they live this out unwittingly and unconsciously, then they may become victims of the collective or express it in longings in a rather unpleasant way. Illustration of the birth chart of Nikolai Lenin. He was born April 22nd. So again, another Taurus, and also on the power, Lenin. Oh, I thought she said he was May. Who are we looking at that was May? Oh, Karl Marx is May 5th. So they're all Taurus. But Nikolai Lenin, he was Russian. He was also on the power cusp, April 22nd. Now let's look at Lenin's chart. Remember that in Mark's horoscope, Uranus and Neptune are conjuncting. Here in Lenin's chart, Neptune is in 19 degrees of Aries, in square to Uranus in 18 degrees of Cancer. The conjunction for which Marx was a mouthpiece has here appeared as a square, which I think is very relevant in terms of the way Lenin interpreted Marx. So there'd be a little friction there, right? And also, where was Lenin's conjunction? What sign? Or Marx, sorry. Marx, Neptune Uranus conjunction was in Sagittarius. And this is happening in Aries and Cancer. So, his Neptune is in Aries. So his Neptune would actually be trining the conjunction, actually to an exact degree, almost exact degree. He has, their Uranus are trine, but it's squaring Lenin's natal Uranus. So anyways, and it would be quindecile. So his Lenin's Neptune would be trining Karl Marx's Neptune Uranus conjunction in Sagittarius, but his Uranus would be quindecile, I believe. I have to double check on that, but I'm getting tripped up here, so we'll just keep going. And then he has it square in his own chart. Now, some people say, some astrologists believe, conjunctions can play out sort of like trines and squares combined. So it's like you're getting the best and the worst. I see squares more that way. And I know I think it's Truth and Aspect Astrology. And I usually know her name, but I can't think of it right now. She says that squares have the good stuff in there too. I think, that could be why people get caught up in certain squares, is maybe the good stuff is there at first, like she says. But I honestly think they're getting caught up on the other good stuff, like the trines and the other good stuff going on. And then the square hits them later, especially with outer planets. Takes more time. That's why a couple with, I call them malefic squares, but like a Saturn square, Pluto, they break up around 5 or 6 years because it takes a little more time to feel it. Or even like Mars square Uranus, it can cause on and offness from the beginning because Mars is a personal planet, but it's going to take about 5 years for Mars to realize that Uranus is never going to change and they're always going to up and leave. But anyway, I had a client yesterday with a bunch of that going on. So, but I do see it quite often when a couple is struggling. Anyways, I'm kind of being a bobblehead today, so let me kind of chill. Okay. The conjunction for which Marx was a mouthpiece has here appeared as a square, which I think is very relevant in terms of the way Lenin interpreted Marx. The politico-religious vision in Marx is a unity. It's all of a piece and has the powerful suggestion of an answer. In Lenin, the vision splinters, and one half is opposed to the other. Here is another first house Saturn, which is interesting. It seems that both these men who profess to have such concern for the rights and freedoms of others were not actually very prone to offering it in actual life. Now, I would beg to differ. I got a little itch. That's really attractive. I probably should have got off on camera. It's probably allergies. But I would beg to differ that having Saturn on your ascendant is going to be a little bit more of you feeling, let's see here. How did she put it? Just so I stay. They're actually not getting offered many freedoms in real life. Saturn's a restriction on their identity. So they felt burdened to, kind of sacrifice. Saturn's no reward without sacrifice. So they had to sacrifice their identity. Maybe they wanted to be a movie star and be known for their talents for the collective, to help humanity. They had to sacrifice their identity and make their identity, a structure for humanity for the better, because they felt oppressed, is how I would argue it. I would say Saturn in the 7th house might be a little more oppressive, but that would be a little bit more when it comes to, you might marry an oppressive mate if you have Saturn in the 7th house, or you might look for a very serious older mate or something, be attracted to that with Saturn in the 7th. But Saturn on the ascendant, she's saying they wouldn't exert freedom in their life. I think they would feel more restriction, and that may be why they were looking for freedoms. That would be my argument there. And we have another sun in Taurus here. Although Marx thought religion was the opiate of the masses, his vision was permeated with a kind of religious idealism, a feeling for the brotherhood of man which comes from a heart level as much as an intellectual one. In Lenin, there does not seem to have been any possibility of bringing together the feeling values of Neptune with the hard political system of Uranus. The way in which we tend, and see, I don't really know the history of Lenin either, so it's kind of hard for me to elaborate, but I'm hoping she'll get a little more into it. I'm sure if somebody started to tell me, remember, he's the guy that did this and this and that, oh, okay, I remember, but I don't remember off the top of my head. Like, the only Russian leaders I know are like the modern day Putin, and then they had a really bad dictator for a while too, that I would recognize his name and maybe recall a little more of the history on, but I can't even think of his name right now. I'm not a history major, but I do learn a lot of history studying, and reading other subjects. All right. Although Marx thought, the way in which we tend to experience squares is that two urges or needs or sets of values are fighting. This is a very basic interpretive principle. Squares is friction. So fighting, arguing, frustration. It can be a buildup, sometimes sort of a volcanic thing with a square. That's why sometimes it doesn't kick in for a while. Anyways, the combination of energies, Uranus and Neptune, is the same whether it's a square or a conjunction. There is an attempt to bring together the theoretical evolutionary vision of Uranus with the mystical longings of Neptune. But the difference between the conjunction and the square lies in the way the individual experiences them. I like this. She's getting more into this because I kind of went around this a little bit. But if they are in a conjunction, they feel like something united that can potentially be put together. Although the sort of downside of any conjunction is sometimes it can be an overwhelming energy because they're right there on top of each other. But if they are in a square, but can be also be quite inseparable, like Mars conjunct Pluto. Anyways, if they're in a square, they feel like two, and I'm talking synastry most of the time, you guys, but I'll specify if I'm speaking natally since I specialize in synastry, but natally being like a person's birth chart. And in the book, she refers to it as a horoscope. I refer to horoscopes as transits and predicting sort of the future. But anyways, but the difference between the conjunction and square lies in the way the individual experiences them. If they're in conjunction, they feel united. If they're in a square, they feel like two irreconcilably conflicting things. And the person will generally take the side of one against the other. And maybe at different times with different transits flip to the other side, I would argue. This is also why irreconcilably, oh, now I can't say it. I read it the first time correctly. Irreconcilable would be a very key word here because, you know, again, going back to synastry, irreconcilable differences, you know, a couple that divorces after 5 or 6 years, probably that's usually when those outer planets kick in and break a couple up in a square. So that would be irreconcilable differences, probably be the most common reason there. Anyways, I think that the militant atheism, which I mentioned before, is typical of the square rather than the conjunction. The square makes it an obsessive issue. If you side with Uranus against Neptune, which would be more likely in Lenin's case, because his moon is in Aquarius and his sun in Taurus, and he would be inclined more to the rational thinking side of things, then it seems that mysticism was going to be the enemy of the ideological system. Not only mysticism, but everything Neptunian, which means the arts and the imagination in general. Lenin's idea of communism has a very different flavor from that of Marx, because he has made Neptune the enemy. So Lenin wanted, you know, everyone to have, you know, basic income and, you know, be able to, you know, find their talents and flourish. And Lenin, I believe, was more of a dictator about it, and he was one of the very few, especially in a large country, to try to implement communism or socialism. I believe Lenin might have been more of a socialist. Now it's starting to come back to me, you guys. But if you know, write it down. Hi, Dhruva. How are you doing? Thanks for joining me and us. All right. Uranus and Neptune were in opposition just before and during the First World War, during the period leading up to the Russian Revolution and the seizing of power by the Bolsheviks. This is an interesting aspect which will probably appear in the charts of some of the older members of the group in the 1980s. So probably of our grandparents or great-grandparents. All right. Or for some of you, maybe your parents. All right. The opposition started with Uranus in Capricorn opposing Neptune in Cancer, and continued for a while into Aquarius and Leo. I have done quite a number of charts for people belonging to this group. And one of the things that has struck me, which I hope does not upset anyone here, is that this is a sacrificial generation. Probably the Capricorn. Uranus in Capricorn, because Saturn rules Capricorn. There's no reward without sacrifice. So it's a very self-sacrificial group. And, you know, Neptune, Pisces, Neptunian ruled stuff can be as well. You put Neptune in a water sign, you know, it feels very at home. Cancer is also very, there's always a really good word for it just to kind of differentiate Cancer from the others. Not like self-sacrificial, but, you know, very caring and nurturing. Caregiving is Cancer a lot of the time. So, wherever Neptune is, that, you know, a lot of signs are like that. Virgo, you know, can be very, okay, now I'm just getting tripped up. All right, let's get back to reading. Yeah, see here, she's going to go into it. Okay. This is a very sacrificial generation. It has passed through 2 world wars, terrible economic depression, and the complete destruction and transformation of social and personal values. This is the generation born. World War I was, see again, not a history buff, but it was like right around the Great Depression, so I want to say around the 1920s, because World War II was 1942, right in there, so, or I think it ended in 1942 or 3. All right. back to, I wish that was kind of in here, but I could have Googled it. Anyway, so it's a very sacrificial generation. It's been through, the Great Depression, a couple of wars, a lot of transformation in social and personal values. Neptune in Cancer, this is where, is intensely mystical and devotional. Not just about God, but also about the home and family, the fatherland or motherland, the parents and the little plot of land one owns. Wherever Neptune is, that is where a generation tries to experience the divine. Cancerian things become sacred to the group with Neptune in Cancer. My Neptune's in Capricorn, but on my IC, which is Cancer's traditional placement. So I kind of feel this a little, what she's saying. This is pitted against the hard reality of Uranus in Capricorn, where the world is an impersonal place which can only be made sane and orderly by discipline. There's definitely a lot of discipline, hard work, and obedience to temporal law. The economic and political horrors that this generation has passed through seem to me to reflect the split between one set of values and another. In a sense, these three examples of the aspect reflect three different renditions of the same thing. Marx gives voice to the conjunction as a vision of human potential. Lenin comes along and gives voice to the same vision, but it has fallen apart and now seems only possible if some fundamental feeling values are stamped out. Soviet Russia and a whole generation of people born at the same time experience this vision as an impossible tension between opposites, first trying to go one way and then another. The sentimental vision of human brotherhood and the cold cynicism of an order which requires rigid authority to keep coherence are now completely at odds. Uranus and Neptune will be conjuncting again in the 1990s. Perhaps there's a chance for that generation to bring the whole thing back together again. Okay, interesting. So in the 90s, I do feel like a lot of things aligned. Now, a lot happened in the 90s, but I'm not going to go too far into it. But I like when she actually gives us the future dates, because then we can kind of go, okay, she was talking about this in 1980. She's talking about around the First World War. There was an opposition. Now we're coming back, into the conjunction in the 90s. So we've reconciled some of the things over the years. And then, we have a whole new set of problems now when we had Saturn conjunct Pluto in 2020, right? It seems as if, so audience says, and I do got to wrap it up here soon, probably in the next 10 to 15 minutes, but get as far as we can, because I don't want there to be 100 parts to lecture 3. Audience, it seems as if it isn't possible to have an objective vision of things without getting your own chart mixed up on it. Up in it. I could agree to that. Liz says, yes, of course. How are we supposed to see except through our own eyes? You have to relate to it, right? You can't separate a person from his politics or his philosophy or his beliefs. There's always have been and always will be people who propound theories of human nature and social development, believing that they have discovered the truth. What they have discovered is their truth. This applies to psychologists such as Freud and Jung as well. It applies on every level, to all the different branches and schools of therapy and education. One can only describe one's own experience of life, even if it is a collective vision which also brings to a generation of people. Even if your theory is based on observation, the observer affects his experiment and selects those quote-unquote facts which reflect what he perceives as facts. I always refer to the observer effect as well, you guys, if you've been around. I believe it was Einstein, though, who isn't a psychologist, but a scientist, not a social scientist. Even if your theory, okay, let's see. There's no such thing as an objective psychology, unless this is taken into account. Jung began his work as a disciple of Freud. Then he broke away because he disagreed with certain fundamental concepts in Freud's system, and his experience showed him other things. But what his experience showed him was his experience, which was in turn colored by his own psyche and his own horoscope or birth chart. I might just insert birth chart because it is a book study. And I just want to keep the language congruent because I already sometimes mix things up anyways. So perhaps he saw more than Freud. Naturally, my personal feeling is that he did. I think he definitely saw more of the metaphysical. That was my own thought. But that was contingent on his own perceptions being potentially broader. And he certainly didn't see everything. Let's have a look at the charts of Freud and Jung. Freud was a Taurus with Scorpio rising. Gosh, a lot of Tauruses here, right? I feel like Aries tend to be like you'll find a lot of Aries in very pioneering business industry. So like Sam Walton or Hugh Hefner. You find a lot of Aries, like the female Aries are a little more prominent in like the music industry. I feel like Lady Gaga and Mariah Carey. But I do feel like just looking at how we're looking at four Tauruses. Tauruses may four to know. They may be a little more prominent when it comes to being political or powerful figureheads, right? Or even looking into the human psyche, whether it be on an individual level like Freud and Jung did, or on a massive scale, getting into the politics of it. Anyways, Freud was a Taurus with a Scorpio rising. Although Freud, like Marx, decried religion, God was alive and well and hiding in the sexual instinct. For Jung, who was unashamedly religious, although in a rather unorthodox way, God was alive and well and hiding in the core of human individuality. That is not surprising in light of his sun in Leo and his Aquarian ascendant. If you consider the psychological viewpoints of these two great men in terms of their horoscopes, it becomes apparent that they have each focused on what they understand best. Yeah, I think Jung's July 26th, because I just love late July Leos and I love Carl Jung, and I think one day I saw that and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Okay, my Mars in Gemini is trying his ascendant in Aquarius and sextile his sun in Leo. Anyways, it becomes apparent that they have each focused on what they understand best. Where they differ from Joe Bloggs, who runs the cybernetic Gestalt Massage Center down the street and who also has a map of the human psyche, is a bit of a mystery. But I don't think horoscopes show genius. So I disagree with her. She's saying, we can't tell that these people would do these things until hindsight. I think there is much more a predictive quality to it, but it could be due to the research and the books written, for us to reflect on. Anyways, but both Freud and Jung have the sun in strong aspect to an outer planet, which at least suggests that they were receptive to a more transpersonal or deeper level of human experience than just their own personal lives. I almost feel like maybe in the 1980s, like astrology was still a little like hippie. So maybe that's why maybe she's in a bit of denial about how much we can predict about a person in their horoscope. It's like, oh, we don't want to label anyone. We can't really tell someone will be a mass murderer. Well, how come most serial killers, and she's a Virgo, I have a Virgo moon, but how come most serial killers are mutable signs, okay? Not all mutable signs are serial killers, but almost all serial killers are mutable signs. And I think it's just because of the dichotomy of the nature, the duality. It's like some of them can balance it, some of them can't. Some of them go a little off the rocker, but it's a little easy to get off the rocker when you're always rocking because you're mutable, right? And you're always adapting. So it's a little easier to kind of maybe get off on a little weird thought process, okay? Or get conditioned a little too far off the tracks if you're, because fixed signs are very much centered. So they don't generally, veer very much. It's like they are who they are. And cardinal signs are sort of exploring all the time. Mutable signs can get a little like confused and maybe do some, not excusing it, but anyways, so I definitely think you can tell by a birth chart somebody's potential. And it's like, here's the potentials of what this person can be by their birth chart. You might be, a really good writer, but you're dabbling in this and now you put writing to it and this takes off for you. So it's like you don't have to be a writer and you might not be successful as a writer just because you have strong writing placements, but once you tie it into some other key thing in your chart, you could very much find your niche. And also looking at someone, like if you brought me a chart and I didn't know whose it was, I could probably get pretty close to estimating, like say you knew who it was, but I didn't, who they are. Okay, so I think we've come a long way maybe in the last 40 years, but like I said, it may be due to these writings and just the influence and really researching in hindsight. Now I do feel like we are some astrologists, and me in certain ways, but I know it's very specialized, are able to make very strong predictive statements that probably do align and correlate pretty closely with reality. It doesn't mean we should throw someone in jail preemptive of any actions based on their birth chart, which is kind of what I feel like she's up against maybe in her own birth chart or culture or psyche, is like, if I say, I don't want to say that we could say somebody is this because of their sign or their birth chart, but yes, you can get a good idea, but it doesn't mean, like, innocent till proven guilty if it's something bad, but it's like, yes, they have the propensity to do this. If they're not going to actually live it out, they might have the propensity to write some books very thoroughly on it that make us wonder how their mind went there, anyways. Anyways uh, okay, but both Freud and Jung have the sun in a strong aspect to an outer planet, which at least suggests they were receptive to more transpersonal or deeper level of human experience than just their own personal lives. They are not only describing their own psychologies, but also something broader, more collective, more universal. Freud had the sun conjuncting Uranus. In a sense, Freudian psychology is a kind of ideology, a map of social restructuring, because the rampaging id, that's what he called it, the id, which is a source of human pathology, must first be understood and then tamed by the ego. Freedom from the imprisoning terrors of the unconscious comes from understanding and harnessing the natural forces. This is very Uranian. So it might be like my Saturn conjunct my Uranus, why I kind of feel that we can transmute our birth charts in our, in our challenges. Anyways, Freud wanted very badly to be scientific. And on the surface, he seems to be, although underneath, you can feel the dogmatism and rigidity, which are not really part of a truly scientific viewpoint. But Freud had absolutely no time for the mystical. Human biology was a great mystery for him, but he persisted in seeing it as nature rather than as nature and spirit both. Jung also tried to present himself scientifically, but it comes across as more of a surface irritation, an annoyance with his psychiatric colleagues that he has not been taken seriously. But it is obviously an imaginal and non-rational experience that drives him, rather than an ideology. He had the sun in an exact square to Neptune. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. It's like he wanted to explore Neptunian things, but his culture and his society and his profession and his identity in the sun wouldn't allow him to as much as he wanted to. So that square was actually giving him an interest in Neptunian things, but then he had to like reel it back, because that's very much how Jung was with like astrology and occult topics. So religious feeling is apparent throughout his work, and the road to an experience of the numinous is through submission to it rather than control of it. That is very Neptunian, like a monk. Think of like a monk in a way. Like Neptunian submission is sort of like monks that take a vow of silence. Okay, so here's the birth chart of Sigmund Freud, if you want to take a screenshot of it. And here's the birth chart of Carl Jung, if you want a screenshot of that. Okay. Both these men had the sun placed in the 7th house. Ooh, very interesting. My sun is in my 7th house. Okay. They would therefore be likely to develop their own individualities through the catalyst of others, which is, of course, the core of all analytical work. Whether an analyst is Freudian or Jungian, it is the relationship between two people which is the cornerstone of the work, right? 7th house rules one-on-one relationships. So, Freud invented talk therapy. That's where a therapist sits down with a client one-on-one in a private setting, and they talk about their one-on-one relationships outside of there. Well, the therapist doesn't, but they talk about the clients. And that's actually how I do a lot of my practice with, with my astrology clients and tarot readings. It's very one-on-one most of the time and it's actually kind of hard for me to get on here and talk to all of you. It takes a little more energy and a little bit, it's like, it's very natural for me to help someone one-on-one, but out to the masses is quite a bit different. And then Jung, I was thinking his one-on-one, even though it's squaring to Neptune, he still very much deals a lot with the unconscious, like, symbolism and things like that, how it's affecting our psyche on an individual one-on-one level. He also, Jung wrote a lot of the dream interpretations that we have. He felt dreams were very significant. That's Neptunian. Okay. Anyways, um, they both gave expression to the outer planet vision through vocations which involved others. Okay. So, audience says, what was Freud's attitude towards astrology? A little sip. Liz, I don't know whether he had any special attitude toward astrology in particular. Certainly in his early work, anything that smacked of the occult was an irritation to him. But it seems that at the end of his life, he began to reconsider some of the more mysterious phenomenon he encountered. It isn't surprising that the so-called supernatural would be disturbing to his sun in Taurus, which is a very pragmatic sign. And it's funny too because I was just talking to my guy the other day about how some of the tells, I'm like, when I know somebody's sign when I first meet them, there's always a tell. And I was kind of listing off some of the tells that were kind of coming back to me. I'm like, if somebody starts talking about their shoes having to be perfectly white, or they just say they don't care about their shoes at all, they're usually a Leo. I'm like, if somebody, if once a man said to me that he loves to buy women shoes, I was like, he's a Taurus, because Taurus men are the most feminine sign, and they're not feminine, they can be very masculine. My dad was a double Taurus, and he's very masculine, manly man, but they love the feminine things, but they like them on a woman. They love women, basically. So Taurus, like male Taurus being the most feminine sign doesn't make them like effeminate, really. It just makes them love women that much more. So they're definitely ladies men. So but it just reminded me, another thing I'll know with a Taurus is I can't remember how they do it, but they'll do it the same way. They'll either be like, they won't want to tell you their sign, or they don't think their sign matters, and they'll kind of say it the exact same way to me, which I can't recall right now. Cancers too will do that. Cancer men, a lot often they're like, oh, what does it matter, but I think Taurus men say it in a very particular way, like, I'm a Taurus, what does it matter, or something. I can't remember, it's been a minute. But so it's interesting that she says, so-called supernatural world would be disturbing to a sun in Taurus, which is a very pragmatic sign. But at the same time, I do feel that even, and I do feel like especially female Tauruses might be a little more into astrology, especially if they have any like Pisces in their chart. And Taurus is trying to Pisces. So I do feel like most Tauruses will have a tolerance for it, if not an interest in it, due to other factors in their chart. Um, but yeah, the male Taurus is, it's like, if you're a girl that's really into astrology, they're going to be like, why do all girls like astrology? They're not going to, anyways, most of them, unless they have like some Pisces or Cancer in their chart, which is more than one sign away. So some will, some won't. Anyways, it's not as likely as like them having some Aries or some Gemini in their chart, though, is what I'm saying, because those are one sign away from Taurus. Anyways, but with Scorpio on the ascendant, he can't have been aware of the mysterious and inexplicable happenings in his life, a person's life. Because Scorpio is very perceptive and sees people's secrets, and that is definitely an intuitive gift, if not supernatural. So I'm sure that's how Freud was able to, with the seventh house sun, he could deal one-on-one with people, and then the Scorpio ascendant, he could definitely see right through them. Like, he was the therapist you come to, and he's like, oh, aha, I already know your issues, Okay. Even could manipulate if he wanted to very well, because I am hearing some schools of thought now about modern psychology being, BS, and it's a cover for these things, which I'm always open to listening. I'm not saying that, so don't hold me to the fire on that, but it is interesting. It's like, well, it also could give him some very strong manipulative qualities to have, a water sign on the ascendant, and be that perceptive, if that was sort of the twist. Dealing with the dark side or the occult is, something Scorpio would be adept at. I would interpret a great conflict between the Taurian scientist and the Scorpionic fascination with mysterious depths. One cannot avoid encountering strange synchronous phenomenon in analytic work. Any dealings with the unconscious forces a person to recognize the non-rational side of life. Not everything can be explained biologically. Freud's Scorpio ascendant led him very deep indeed. But I think that all of the signs the sun in Taurus, but I think there's a little bit of grammatical errors here, so it's not me tripping this time. I think she means, yeah, I had to correct one kind of on the fly there. I think that all the signs, oh yeah, that of all the signs, that was my bad, but there was one I fixed over. The sun in Taurus finds it hardest to live in that non-rational world. If something can't be demonstrated with facts and explained concretely, then Taurus will recoil and become frightened. Even some Virgos can do that too. Not all, because they are mutable, so they're a little more open, but some of them can, especially the males. I think males in general, just not all men, I'm not generalizing, but let's say 50% of men are going to have a hard time swallowing astrology, where maybe only 30% of women are, something like that. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know the exact stats on that. Um, Jung, on the other hand, wasn't at all impelled to reject the so-called occult world. He postulated it psychologically rather than esoterically, but he didn't have to repudiate it. From very early life, he was subject to strange inner experiences and visions. This is, that square to Neptune, Sun square Neptune. I have Sun, weird, I have Sun square Neptune too, but it's a wide orb. I gotta look up what my Neptune is. I gotta pull up my birth chart so I'm ready. Okay, makes sense now why Jung's like one of my favorites. All right. And there's a couple articles on like the Jung website I told you guys about astrology that I want to go over. So I should just hop on and do like a separate video of that sooner rather than later. If I ever think of it when I'm not actually on a live, should write a note. Okay, I'm starting, my attention span's starting to go here. So we're just going to finish to this next audience question. And then we will be back. Yeah, then we should be able to wrap up lecture 3 on the next one, which I'll try to get on tomorrow, you guys. But all right, but it might be earlier in the day if I do. Okay. He didn't try to repudiate it. From very, very early on, he was subject to strange inner experiences and visions. We're talking about Carl Jung. This seems to me typical of the Sun-Neptune aspect. Also, as a fire sign, he had less need to relate everything to the body. One can see this difference among many astrologers. Uranus is supposed to rule astrology, but I think that many more Uranian astrologers are really interested in the system and the laws which lie behind the system. So maybe she's talking about like the ephemeris and the sky and the astronomy, and then maybe the humanitarian connections of that. And I would say that too. I always say, yes, we associate the 11th house, Aquarius and Uranus, with astrology, but it's sort of what I just said, that body of astrology, whereas Scorpio and Pluto and Neptune and Pisces are sort of another body, the more spiritual body. I would say Scorpio, the more unconscious and the psyche, the psychology part of the body of astrology, and sort of the unknown stuff too, like the hidden knowledge that's passed on, and knowing the secrets and the wisdom and the mysteries. And then there's also some mysteries with the 12th house as well, but it's not the unconscious of the psyche of the person. Like if we went back to that, this right here, this is kind of where it all ties together. I just thought this, right? So we have, then it kind of reminds me of Freud's id too, with the icebergs, but so it all ties together, right? No matter who you're, like who's touching on it, but we have the conscious, the personal unconscious. So the consciousness would be like out here. This would be the Uranian astrology, I would say, like your consciousness connecting and seeing and observing, and what's observable or scientific, the actual astronomy. And then the personal unconscious would be the Plutonic, the Pluto Scorpio, that this stuff. It's in your, you just have to kind of bring it up. It's a little hidden from you. It's your own secrets and, secret mysteries. That would be the personal unconscious. And then the collective unconscious would be the sort of Neptunian, Piscean, Jungian school of astrology, where it's like, okay, dreams and things like that. All right, that's a really good illustration while I'm telling you it. Maybe it helps me make it more concrete too, so I don't trip up when I'm trying to explain it. All right, gosh, now I see Nietzsche down here. It makes me want to keep going. All right, so Jung had, he was a fire sign. Uranus, he had the moon in Aquarius. But I think that many more Uranian astrologies are really interested in the systems and the laws which lie behind the system, that more conscious version of astrology. The logical basis of astrology appeals to Uranus. So does the research side of it, right? The known, the conscious. The magical element is rather offensive to Uranus, in the sense of something inexplicable which must be felt rather than understood. The Neptunian viewpoint is more comfortable with the subjective experience of astrology and the imagery of it, and the more so-called spiritual aspect of it. Someone who is terribly Neptunian will often find statistical research quite offensive because it denies any kind of fluidity or subjective reality. This is why I'm a pretty good astrologist, not to toot my own horn, is because I'm like both Uranian and Neptunian with it. Well, more mercurial, but it goes with Uranus, like the Virgo. Anyways, the Virgo 12th house moon, that's really right there, sums up the analytical and the intuitive astrologer that I am. We won't go into all the Pisces in my chart too, Mercury and Pisces opposite that, but anyway. Okay, I'm an Aries. I have to relate it to myself, but she says we all do that anyways. So the more you get to know me, the more you get to know your own chart, the more you get to know yourself, the more you get to know astrology. That would be very much like also a psychological way of looking at astrology. Jung or Freud would probably agree with that. So, authenticity and self-awareness. Okay, let me finish this paragraph and then we're going to wrap it up for the day. Oh, and that was the one thing when I was showing you guys the divine-timing-database.org moon match. That was the thought that I lost at the very beginning of this video, is they are having a 50% off sale through the end of the year. So if you go on there, I did say that. So definitely if you're single and you have an ounce of belief in astrology and you're already dating online, especially, submit to the database, enter the database, find an astrological match, and just see if maybe you don't find something that works for you, a relationship. And you can you can auto search instantly and start talking with your match right away. And by now, there's enough people in there. Most of you are going to have about 1 to 3 matches. But like I said, some of them are going to be best potential, which is still really, really good. I see a lot of great life partnerships with that. And if you get a best rare, you kind of hit the lotto. Okay, doesn't mean it's going to work out, but you should have 2 or 3 now matches to be able to get to know and choose from in there. So anyways, and if you have already entered, might be the time to go in there and kind of run the auto search again. Because if somebody does match with you, they'll reach out to you on Messenger and you'll get an email right away. But maybe, maybe they didn't get around to it, maybe you can go in there and give them a nudge. All right. Or maybe you missed the message too. All right. Anyways, the magical case. The Neptune viewpoint is more comfortable with the spiritual aspect. Someone who is terribly Neptunian will often, they'll be allergic to the statistical aspect. Jung was, of course, not wholly Neptunian because of his Aquarian ascendant and Saturn rising in Aquarius. I think he suffered a conflict between the richness of his inner experiences and the perceptions and the needs to communicate them in a logical way which would be comprehensible to his colleagues. And he also wanted to be taken seriously with that Saturn, right? But I think at the core, the bias of Jung's work is towards Neptune, while the bias of Freud's work is towards Uranus. Or I would argue even Saturn. Or I'd say Saturn might be sort of what made them actually be taken seriously as psychologists, regardless of their, influences, their astrological beliefs and such. And the strange paradox is it is Freud's work which comes across with a more dogmatic religious tone, while Jung's is much more open and reasonable, right? It is kind of strange because Freud was the least religious, but his is the most dogmatic. So the question that we'll start off with tomorrow, or hopefully tomorrow, it'll be lecture 3, part 5, and it'll be the final part of lecture 3, and then we'll get into lecture 4. But the audience question is, are you saying that the 2 points of view are completely incompatible? So we'll elaborate a little more when we start out tomorrow on Freud and Jung, and then we'll finish up lecture 3. We maybe even get into lecture 4 tomorrow. So she's talking about orbs. That's what I really should just title these videos. I did do it on one of them where I know we were being very specific about a few things, but I should be like, okay, finishing Karl, Marx and Hitler, and going into Jung and Freud. Anyways, I'm excited. Oops, I kind of lost my page there, so okay, there we go. Put our 6 of Wands. So if for any of you, or no, yeah, no, spades. Clubs is wands. Spades is swords. 6 of Swords. We're moving to fresher waters, smoother waters by researching. Swords is air, words. All right. Also Uranian. Mercury and Uranus, probably the best wordsmiths. I'm trying to think. Yeah, for the most part. And the 9th house can be great journalism as well. Like Sagittarius and Jupiter energy can be a really good journalist, but Mercury and Uranus probably are going to be the best writing. If you have a strong Uranus or Mercury placement, or the planets that they're ruled by, Aquarius, Gemini, and Virgo, you're probably going to be strong in writing in some form or capacity, or reading. My aunt's an Aquarius. She was always a bookworm, and then my grandmother is a Virgo. We were talking about that, and she's a huge bookworm. There's about 500 bookshelves. So maybe one of these days I'll actually like scan it and show you guys, but there's a ton of books out there. There's like from the floor to the ceiling, like I think 8 shelves all the way across this huge wall and around the corners. So, and then I brought a lot of my books. So anyways, definitely check out moonmatch.love and check out the rest of the series if you want. I'll pin the playlist in the comments. I have a feeling I'm going to get a phone call any minute because my man's getting off work, so gotta figure out what's for dinner. But I'm sending you all lots of love, blessings, and light, and I'll try to be on tomorrow. Sometimes if I don't get on tomorrow, then not. Usually Friday's too crazy, so it wouldn't be until Monday again, but I will be back. Hopefully tomorrow we can wrap up lecture 3. I'm going to put it at the top of the priority list. All right, sending you all lots of love, blessings, and light as always. Love it. And if you ever want me to go over your birth chart with you, it's rotation411.com.